sound.
Saan ba nilolog yung Saan?
Hello po, good afternoon po, Ma'am Kyra.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry ang aga ko. Just paranoid about the sound.
Nandito na po kayo. May gusto po ba kayong like i-test? Before we start po later, ganun po.
Or the Canva presentation, or if you wanted to do it, just so I know on the, let me know.
Okay. Hello po, good afternoon po, Ma'am Kyra. Bale po kami na po yung magpa-flash ng PowerPoint niyo po, ma'am. Tapos, naka-ready na po siya, like we downloaded na po everything. So, ayun po.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna be quiet now. And
Okay po, sige po. Thank you. Bale po kami na po yung magpa-flash ng PowerPoint niyo po, ma'am. Tapos, naka-ready na po siya, like we downloaded na po everything. So, ayun po.
okay, thank you. I'm just gonna be quiet now.
Okay, sige po. Bale po kami na po yung magpa-flash ng PowerPoint niyo po, ma'am. Tapos, naka-ready na po siya, like we downloaded. Hello po, Sir Ronald.
Hi.
Hello po. Thank you for giving us the time to attend to help us here. How are you po today naman po?
Sure. No problem. No problem. I'm happy to do it. I'm doing well. Thank you. It's just very hot. But how are you? How's everybody?
I completely agree po. Sobrang init po talaga here. I think everybody's okay. How are you guys? Does anybody want to share before we start? Kamusta kayo on this hot day in the Philippines? Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming on time. As of the moment, we are still 35 in this Zoom webinar. So let's wait for the other participants to enter. So for the meantime, make yourself comfortable and we'll start in a few minutes. Thank you. Where is my co-host? Calling my co-host, Kai. Are you here?
Hi, Ponce. Rinig ka ako. Oh my God. Grabe, nagka-problem sa internet namin.
Yeah,
Kamusta ka naman?
I completely understand. You know, like a while ago, I had to go to another house just to, have stable Wi-Fi. So I'm happy that it's stable now, I think. So yeah,
Sana talaga.
I'm doing okay naman. What about you? How's your TikTok career?
So, wala. Hey, ikaw, kamusta ka? Kamusta yung TikTok account mo?
Okay naman. I'm spreading awareness about our mental health webinar right now. I'm telling people, I'm inviting them. So hopefully a lot of people will tune in. I'm just so excited right now. And I'm kind of nervous. What about you?
Ako din, sobrang kinakabahan kasi grabe yung mga guest speakers natin for today. Mga bigatin, oh my God.
Super true. You know, I kind of talked to Sir Ronald and Ma'am Kyra kanina, and wow, their speaking voice, sobrang speaker ang dating, nakakatuwa.
Naku, mukhang mapapalaban ang English skills ko for today, Ponce.
Okay, oh, I see Ma'am Miles is here. Hi po, Ma'am
Hello.
Miles.
Oo,
How are you po
here.
today?
I'm fine. I came early.
Yeah, I can see that po, Ma'am. Ma'am, baka ikaw po yung may early bird prize.
No. No. Alam mo si Sir Ronald, may kapangalan siyang professor. So when you called Sir Ronald, and the surname is almost Ronald del Castillo. Is he a professor also? Does he teach? Hi, Sir Ronald.
Hi.
You
No, I
love-
did. I taught at UP until
Oh.
yeah. I left in December. I'm a consultant now for the UN World Food Program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when my student called you, oh my colleague. Thanks for gracing our occasion.
Oh, sure.
This event.
No problem. Thank you. I'm happy to do it.
Ponce, how many guests do we have? 3, right?
Yes po, 3 speakers po, and it's almost 2:05, and we are currently 42 participants in this Zoom.
May we start?
Okay po, sige po.
Ponce.
Okay, so since it is currently 2:05, once again, good afternoon, everyone. Before we formally start, let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord.
Light of truth and of kindness, our Lord and our God, we cannot proceed with this gathering without directing to you our call and praise. Out of the abundance of your goodness, bless us with your soothing presence manifested in mind, and light truth in a heart inflamed by your love and in a political will determined to do simply what is pleasing to you. Father of comfort and solace, give us the opportunity to gain from this gathering an increased unity of purpose and will, the best intentions for projects and programs in the midst of diverging and converging approaches and a friendship among co-equals. All for the glory of your name and for the University of Santo Tomas. Amen.
So before we get into the webinar itself, please let us introduce ourselves. Hello, I am Kai Diab.
And I am Sophia Ponce, and we are your hosts for today. We welcome you to Bite by Bite, a webinar about distinguishing the prominent eating disorders among Filipinos. We are here today to tackle another very important, yet rarely discussed topic.
I think this is a great opportunity for us to open a conversation about eating disorders and just learn about it and even empathize for the peoples who are going through it.
I completely agree with that, Kai. So that's why today we prepared this forum and invited guest speakers who can help and enlighten us about eating disorders.
So to have a smooth flow of the program, we have a few reminders for our audience. We encourage everyone to turn their cameras on but keep their microphones off during the discussion of the speakers. Conversation about
Yes, and if you have any questions for the speakers, we will be having a panel discussion towards the end of the program. So please take note of your questions, and don't worry, we will make sure that we can entertain all of them.
And we also highly encourage everyone to participate in the activities that the organizers have prepared for you.
Okay, so and with that, we will be having an icebreaker. So Kai, can you tell us the mechanics of the game?
Siyempre naman, ready na ba ang lahat? So our icebreaker is entitled It's Showtime, Bring Me Food Edition. So not like any other Bring Me games, the facilitators, us, Ponce and me, will mention foods or ingredients or a dish in this game, and we can either ask you to bring at least two ingredients of adobo or pandesal, for example. The first student who will type his or her name on the chat box will be participating in the game. The last name should be capitalized. Again, the last name should be capitalized, and if not, your chance to participate will be invalidated and the spot will be given to the next participant. The chosen participant will be required to open his or her camera to show us the food or foods required to be brought by the facilitator. 1 point will be given if the chosen participant brought the right food or foods requested by the host. So the participant who will garner the highest points will be the winner of this game. So are you ready, guys?
Yeah, are you ready, guys? Wow, I'm so pumped. I wish I could participate, but I'm a host. So yeah, are you guys
Should we
ready?
start, Ponce?
Yeah, let's go. You go first, Kai.
Okay. Ready na bang lahat? Guys? Mukhang ready na sila. Ayan, sumasagot sila ng ready. Ready na ha? So, for our first item, bring me corned beef. Again, bring me corned beef.
Okay, guys, corned beef. Beef na kinorn. Come on.
Kahit anong brand pa yan, basta corned beef.
Don't forget to capitalize your surname before you send it into the chat box if ever you have the item that we're asking for. So yeah, corned beef, guys. Let's go.
Ayan, si Miss Sande. Miss Sande, ready ka na ba?
Let's go, Miss Sande. Please open your camera and show us your corned beef. Wow naman, Del Mondo pa. That's like my favorite brand of corned beef. So, Dave, thank you so much for participating, Miss Sande.
So, yes, 1 point for Miss Sande. Ponce, could you introduce the next item?
Okay, so thank you so much, Miss Sande. For our second item, guys, bring me milk. I repeat, bring me milk. Fresh milk, carton milk, any type of milk. Come on.
Gatas ng kapatid nyo, kahit ano pa yan. Kahit anong brand. Yan. Mukhang kumukuha pa sila, Ponce.
Parang malayo-layo.
Ayan!
Oh my gosh, okay. Miss Flores, open your camera. Wow, Magnolia!
So shy, Ponce. Wala.
Magnolia, please sponsor Miss Flores. Thank you so much, Miss Flores, for showing us your milk. Okay, Kai, please state the third item.
Ready na ba? So, ito naman, pakukuhain namin kayo ng 2 to 3 ingredients, ha? Ready? Lapit na kayo sa kusina. Okay, 1, 2, ready. The third item is adobo. Again, the third item is adobo. Kahit anong ingredients, 2 to 3 ingredients ng adobo.
Okay, so ano nga ba laman ng adobo, no guys? Isip tayo. Recall your TLE classes if ever nagluto man kayo ng adobo.
Naku, mukhang madami yung kinukuha nila, ha?
Baka nagkakatay pa sila ng manok, ganun.
Pumunta pa sa palengke, ganyan. Wala pa ba, guys?
Let's go, guys. 2 ingredients of adobo. No matter how big or how small that ingredient may be, basta nahanap sa adobo.
Ako, mukhang napapatagal sila. Malayo ba ang kusina, guys?
Let's go, guys. At 2 ingredients of adobo. No matter. Okay, I think masyado mahirap yung adobo. I guess we could give another easy one. So
Okay,
instead
sige.
of ingredients for adobo, let's say bring me an ingredient for spaghetti. So any ingredient for spaghetti, whether Filipino style, Italian, whatever ingredient for spaghetti. At least two ingredients for spaghetti.
Si Miss Sunday na naman ata ang nauna, Ponce.
Okay, so stand up, please show. Okay. So we have sweet spaghetti na Fiesta brand.
Taray.
Buti ba si Miss Sandy naka-stock up ng food, no? Okay, so the point goes to Miss Sande. Thank you so much. Okay, so this
Okay.
final item na last na, guys. So bring me, one item na lang to, bring me saging, banana, whoever has their paunahan na lang po.
Kahit anong uri ng saging, kahit luto na, kahit banana na yan, basta may nakita kami saging. Ayan si Ramos, aba ang bilis na. Miss Ramos, Nicole Ramos.
Miss Ramos, patingin nga po. Kung ano, wow! Grabe.
Grabe naman, ang talaga lang.
Saging. Okay, so I think that's the last item for this game.
Should we announce the winner, sponsor? Meron na ba?
I think so. Okay, so after that icebreaker, the winner of our game is Miss Sande. So congratulations. Kindly check your chat box as you will be reached out by one of the organizers for your prize. Thank you so much for all of the participants. Thank you, Miss Sande, for sharing with
Grabe,
me up there.
hataw si Miss Sunday ngayon, ha?
Yes,
Nakailan ba siya, Ponce?
I think naka 3 points siya or something. Grabe.
Nasa kusina ata si Miss Sunday ngayon eh, kaya siya yung nauuna eh.
Baka na-feel niya kung ano yung icebreaker natin. Anyway, so I think that we are fully energized and ready to listen to our first guest speaker to share with us his knowledge and experience to educate us more about the topic.
So our first speaker is trained as a clinical psychologist with expertise in public mental health and social policy. He is a consultant for the UN World Food Program and was an associate professor at the College of Public Health at UP Manila. He was trained at Fordham, Palo Alto University, Stanford, Harvard, Tufts, UCLA, King's College London, and the National University of Singapore. He regularly writes opinion pieces for Rappler and The Inquirer. He is also a member of the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering and is a fellow of the UK Royal Society for Public Health. Let us all welcome Mr. Ronald Del Castillo, PsyD, MPH, FRFPH.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to the class, to your professor for inviting me. Wherever you are, wherever you're watching this, I hope you and your loved ones are safe. Just a couple of housekeeping stuff whenever I whenever I talk. I have two cats, so in case a cat flies across the screen, we'll just have to ignore the cat. All right, they're both awake at the moment because they just ate. So just FYI. All right, I'll get right to it since we don't have a lot of time. I think the first thing to keep in mind of the stuff I'm going to tell you is that eating problems or eating related issues here in the Philippines is not well known, in part because we don't document it very well. There's a couple of national studies going on right now, one being the National Survey for Mental Health, which is coming through the DOH and run by the UP College of Medicine. So we might find out some of that material, some eating-related issues, perhaps through in our population-based survey. But just FYI, a bunch of the stuff I'm going to tell you, for better or for worse, is really based on the experiences of other countries. But having said that, I do think there is some familiar symptoms or familiar behaviors, I think, that are cross-cutting in different parts of the world. So I'll start with anorexia. Anorexia and bulimia have a bit of overlap, but there is a distinction between the two. Just a little bit of background. So anorexia is essentially where you don't want to eat. Okay, so orexis is a Greek word for appetite, and ano means the absence of. So anorexis is the absence of appetite. So the official name, which is anorexia nervosa, nervosa meaning nervous, obviously. So the Greek term literally translates to nervous absence of appetite, right? So nervous absence of appetite. Historically, like many other mental health problems, not just eating related, but like other mental health problems, we can trace back to behaviors that are common in history. For example, we know that there's some records in ancient times of not eating or fasting for so long. But the difficulty with historical records is we can't really tell the psychological component of that, which I'm going to talk about in a second, right? So we can describe that some people in history chose not to eat for a long period of time, but whether or not there's a psychological, emotional piece attached to it is much harder to determine. Not until around the 1860s and 1970s by the name of Dr. William Gull, Gull, who was one of the physicians of Queen Victoria. And Dr. Gull, in a paper called Anorexia Nervosa, which is where we got the name, in a paper called Anorexia Nervosa, he presents 3 cases of 3 women, and they were all women, with symptoms of what we now know as anorexia nervosa. Oh, by the way, I don't have a presentation, so you're just going to have to sit there and listen to me. So that was 1860s, 1870s, but we don't really get into anorexia in the popular culture, if you will, until around the 1960s, mid-1960s, where issues of body image came into the clinical work of many psychoanalysts and other mental health professionals at the time. So body image issues really gave rise, really took off in the 1960s. And so when we're talking about 1960s, I'm talking about the US primarily and Western Europe in particular. So 1960s body image issues. Now, if you know a little bit about US history, that's not really surprising because in the 1950s, a decade before that, was the rise of consumer culture, right? And so the rise of consumer culture is associated with body image issues, all right? And issues around thinness, which we'll talk about in a second, okay? But it was not until around 1970s and 1980s where anorexia as an eating disordered phenomena began to take hold in popular culture, especially with the work of Dr. Bruch, B-R-U-C-H, who is a German psychoanalyst who wrote this widely popular book on eating disorders in 1973. it was not until 1980 that anorexia was then officially sort of recognized in the DSM. And I think I'm sure you're familiar with the DSM. But in the US in particular, anorexia was really, really widely covered after the death in 1983 of Karen Carpenter. I know you're very young, and I don't expect you to know who she is, but she was a singer who was a duo with her brother called the Carpenters, and they're very good. You should listen to them. But anyway, she died of an eating disorder in 1983. She died due to heart failure associated with eating disorders. Okay, and that's one of the issues that one faces when one has anorexia nervosa. So the way I'm going to lay out for you anorexia nervosa, I'm going to talk about sort of the common things we look for, sort of the clinical presentation, and then I'm going to share with you what we call associated features, meaning things we look out for but are not necessary criteria for making, say, a diagnosis, right? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about etiology and treatment as well. All right, so let's start with anorexia. Okay, so there are three main sort of symptoms or criterion we can look out for. Number one, you're not eating enough to sustain your nutrition and body for your age, for your developmental stage, right, and your physical health, right? So you're not eating to the degree that your body weight is low for your age and again, right, developmental, right? So obviously, children need to eat a lot because they're growing, and as you get older, we tend to not need to eat so much, all right? So you don't eat to the degree that your body weight is low. That's the eating behavior part. And this is where the psychological, emotional part comes in. So that's the first part, right? Not eating enough, low body weight. But the second part is you are not eating a lot because you are terrified of gaining weight, all right? Or becoming fat, all right? So it's one thing to not eat a lot. It's quite another to not eat a lot because you're so terrified of not wanting to become fat as you perceive it, right? Or not wanting to gain weight, right? So I'm sure all of us can relate, right? Every now and then, maybe we don't have an appetite. Maybe we don't want to eat. We just don't feel like it, right? That's fine. I think that happens to many of us. I think it happens to all of us. The unique experience of people with anorexia is they really, really are terrified of gaining weight, right? And of becoming fat. And so with that, so that's number two. With that, another psychological, emotional component that we look out for is that there is this sort of morphed or disturbed connection between my body weight or shape and my self-evaluation. In other words, I see my self-worth, I see my self-value as a person related to the shape of my weight and body, okay? Again, I think that happens to all of us, all right? I mean, all you gotta do is look at Instagram. I mean, we're not, some people, you've seen those, right? Like someone is showing their abs or whatever, they're working out, and they usually have some kind of random quote about, oh, you can work out hard as well. I mean, come on, we're not there for the quotes. We're there to see your abs, all right? Now, it's okay that we have some kind of image issues, blah, blah, blah. We all do, which we can talk about later on in the Q&A. But for people with anorexia, the disturbance is quite strong, right? So any sort of slight comment about anything to do with weight or body shape, then it's evaluated to the extreme that it's connected to their self-worth and self-evaluation as a person. Right, so those are the three main criteria: not eating enough, intense fear of gaining weight, and then disturbance between body weight or shape, and then their self-evaluation. So those are the three main things. The associated features, the stuff we look out for, but are not really necessary criteria, if you will, for making a diagnosis, is a couple of things. There are typically, especially for severe cases of anorexia, medical problems, severe medical problems. So such as major organ problems, organ systems problems. Now, that's not really surprising, right? If you're not eating, you're not nourishing your physical body. So your body is not functioning as it should. And so it's going to suffer, obviously, because it's not getting the food and nutrients that it needs. Another thing we look out for is for girls or young women in particular, there is amenorrhea, which is the absence of menstruation. For people with anorexia, especially young girls, they can go on for months without going through a period, and that can be attributed to the eating disorder. They could have hypertension or what do we call this, or other abnormal sort of vital signs, abnormal vital signs due to the eating disorder. Again, if you're not eating well or not eating enough, you tend to lose bone density, right? So again, you should be eating, right? Because it obviously provides nutrition to your bones. And so you lose bone density if you're not eating enough. Another is dry skin. Dry skin is another phenomena. Is called lanugo, Lanugo. Lanugo is little hairs. They start to grow this little fine hairs. Lanugo is a natural occurrence of little hairs, fine hairs that are not yet colored or pigmented. And they're very common among babies. So if you've ever had a baby, if you have little babies in your life, you can tell they have little hairs all over them. All right, that's natural. It's usually not pigmented. It's like off-white color. For people with anorexia, they start to develop those, right? Those kinds of little hair particles. So that's some of the associated features. Others are also psychological and emotional: depressed mood, irritability, social withdrawal is a common problem. Insomnia is a common problem. Among people with anorexia, there's also obsessive thoughts. Obsessive thoughts, especially around food, like how many calories there are. They're counting calories. They're obsessed about what other people think about what they're eating, and so with that, they might be anxious about eating in front of other people. So especially eating in public. Another is feeling a sense of ineffectiveness, where the eating behavior, or at least the lack of eating behavior, is an attempt to control or to gain control as a counterweight to the feeling of ineffectiveness, right? So also they tend to have a very, to caution, this doesn't go to everybody, obviously, but some of the things we look out for is inflexible thinking, right? The thinking is very narrow, tend to be very narrow, very strict, and their sense of emotional expression is very narrow as well. Okay, so a little bit of background about anorexia. It tends to happen between a little after puberty. It's very common among adolescents and young girls. It happens among boys as well. It's very clear, but it's overwhelmingly common among females, about 10 to 1 relative to males. It's the onset, the start, if you will, is usually triggered by a stressful life event, where the eating or the lack of eating is a way to cope with whatever the stressful life event is. And in severe cases, anorexia is related to high suicide risk. A little bit about background about anorexia is we know from research studies that children, if you look at the childhood experience of people with anorexia, they tend to be children, when they were children, they tend to be children with anxiety or obsessional traits. Anorexia is also common in cultures where being thin is valued, or looking good is valued. There is some genetic research studies to show that if you have a first degree biological relative with anorexia, the risk for you developing it as well is higher compared to someone who doesn't have that first degree biological relative. Another social phenomenon, which is, I think, quite interesting, and I would be interested to know this here in the Philippines, is anorexia is more common in middle and upper class families. Like, it's not a poor family phenomena. It tends to happen especially in upper class families, where the family as a whole looks like they're very stable and well adjusted. But if you pay very close attention to family dynamics, they tend to be very competitive and overly concerned with each other's approval. Right? So they look good, they seem perfect on the outside, but if you pay very close to the dynamics, the parents are very controlling, the children want very strong approval, right? There's a lot of competition among the siblings, right? So that tends to happen among upper class families. For treatment, like other mental health issues, is better when it's complementary or comprehensive. So, but the first line of treatment for anorexia in particular is you need to gain weight. It's the first thing, because we are concerned about your physical health, right? So to avoid or to reduce the medical problems that I described earlier, right? Heart problems, organ failure, and all that kind of stuff. The first line of treatment is to work with your physician to ensure that you have sufficient weight gain, which is part of the reason why it's very difficult. It's very difficult to treat anorexia because the treatment is against their worldview, right? For depression, it's a little different, if I may. For people with depression, treatment can be acceptable because they know, or at least they feel, that people with depression should not feel sad. And so trying to feel better as a treatment makes sense, right? Because it's consistent with your worldview. However, if you have an eating disorder, particularly anorexia, trying to gain weight is against my worldview. So why would I have the treatment, right? Because my worldview tells me that I need to be thin. I need to be this weight. So me gaining more weight doesn't make sense to me, right? So, which is why weight gain is a difficult treatment, even though it is a first line of treatment. Another is cognitive therapy to correct erroneous cognitive beliefs about weight gain, about self-evaluation. Another line of treatment, so I've given you two so far. So first is the medical part, the weight gain. Another is the cognitive part, cognitive therapy. And I think family therapy, very important for people going through anorexia, to reduce high levels of negative interactions and dynamics within the family, including the competition and overly concerned with approval thing that I mentioned earlier. All right, so family therapy is a line of treatment. Okay, so that was a quick view of anorexia. Of course, anorexia is a whole is a complicated problem. When I went to grad school for my clinical psychology degree, we had a whole class on just eating disorders. Right, so it's quite a complex phenomenon. So that was anorexia nervosa. Let me go now to bulimia nervosa. Bulimia, again, just a little bit of tidbit. It comes from a Greek term. Bulimia is a amalgamation, a compound Greek word meaning starved hunger or ravenous hunger. So bulimia nervosa is nervous, ravenous hunger, right? So it's an anxious eating a lot of food. All right, so before I explain what bulimia nervosa is, I think it's important to understand that what binge eating is, right? So binge eating is a telltale sign, potentially, of bulimia nervosa, right? So binge eating, I know we use the term binge eating a lot, but binge eating is a very circumscribed behavior. Binge eating is where you eat a lot of food for a discrete period of time, more so than any other individual would do in that same period of time. So meaning, for 5 minutes, say, you ate so much food, way more than any one of us would eat in 5 minutes. All right. Now, just like anorexia, the eating behavior itself is not sufficient. All right. So when you and I, or when we see a friend or a loved one wolfing down food, it doesn't mean they have a binge eating disorder or a binge eating problem, right? The psychological and emotional component is very important here. So the behavior part, the eating part, we understand, right? So that's eating a lot of food in a discrete period of time. The psychological component is a lack of control. A lack of control where you feel like you cannot stop or control the eating. All right, so it's not just that I'm eating a lot, but I feel like I can't stop myself, right? I can't control this thing that I am doing, right? That is binge eating. And so bulimia are recurrent episodes of binge eating. All right, so when you do binge eating a lot, and what do we mean by that? I don't want to get into the clinical terms, but usually if you do it once a week for 3 months, it's a sign of bulimia nervosa. Okay, that's the clinical term in your DSM. Okay, so one time, at least once a week for about 3 months. But not only that, right? Not only that. So I'm eating a lot. I can't control myself, but now I need to do something about it. Right? I need to do something about it. And that's what we call compensatory behaviors. Right? Compensatory behaviors is to prevent the weight gain from the stuff that you just ate. All right. And that could come from many forms. You could vomit, self-induced vomiting. You could use laxatives or diuretics, or you could fast, meaning you could fast between the eating behaviors, right? So you eat a lot for whatever, 5 minutes or whatever, and then you don't eat again until maybe tomorrow, right? Or you exercise, excessive exercise. So those are some of the compensatory behaviors that happens in binge eating. And just like anorexia, there is a sort of a disturbed connection between body weight and shape and my self-evaluation and my self-worth. People with bulimia, it's harder to detect because people with bulimia tend to be normal weight, right? So people with anorexia it's easier to tell, in part because they lost a lot of weight, so that's easy to tell. But people with bulimia tend to be normal weight or a little overweight, right? Because they're eating, but they're compensating for that overeating. And just like anorexia, there are potentially medical problems as well. There could be tears in your esophagus. There could be gastric problems. There could be cardiac arrhythmias or gastrointestinal problems, right? Because essentially vomiting, when you're vomiting, I don't mean to be graphic, but just to illustrate my point, but when you're vomiting, you're essentially bringing up stuff that should be coming out the other end. So when you're bringing food out, when you've swallowed it, you're bringing up acid and other material that you should be consuming instead. And so, for example, people with bulimia, when you look at their enamel, which is in their teeth or on their fingertips, you could see that they have lost some of the enamel because the acid, when you throw up, touches your teeth. And over time, which is why a lot of acid, anything acidic, we should reduce, right, when we're eating, right? Because that's what our dentist tells us, right? Because we lose the enamel over time. That's the same principle here. And the same thing with their fingers. It starts to blacken or to darken because they've lost the enamel of their fingernails because they use their finger to vomit. And so the acid is touching their, so compared to their other fingers, one of the fingers will be darker, right? Because they're using that finger to throw up. So there are some, what do you call this? Medical problems as well. Okay, so let me give you just a more broader explanation of both the anorexia and bulimia in terms of possible reasons why we have these kinds of eating disorders, right? And there are different kinds of I don't know what I call it, like models or frame. I'm sure you, in many of your classes, right? There's always a model or a framework of some kind. So it depending on your psychological tendencies, it will partly explain some of the eating disorders that we just discussed. So according to Bruch, B-R-U-C-H, the German psychoanalyst I mentioned earlier from the 1970s, part of the reason why people have eating disorders is because they are not able to distinguish hunger from other bodily tension or arousal, right? So in other words, whatever I'm feeling, I'm translating as a hunger issue, right? Instead of anxiety, or instead of I'm tired, I'm lonely, I need some sleep. No, I interpret that as something related to hunger. And therefore, I need to relieve it by doing something with my eating. All right? So according to Bruch, B-R-U-C-H, there is a disconnect between what my body is telling me and how I'm interpreting it. Okay? For Fairburn in the 1990s, he thinks that eating disorders usually have common etiology, such as a family history of weight problems, right? So family history of weight problems, being teased, being bullied as a child, being overweight as a child is another common risk factor. That's Fairburn. Number 3, cognitive models. As I explained this earlier, there are certain kinds of biases about your beliefs or expectations, about your body weight and body shape. Personality factors also figure in, a sense of perfectionism, especially for people with anorexia, a sense of ineffectiveness, a sense of interpersonal distrust. You don't trust other people, right? So these are some personality factors. And the sociocultural model I mentioned earlier, it's more common in cultures where thinness is valued, especially where the media sort of propagates that ideal sort of body type or body shape. And then family influence, of course, is related here, especially high parental expectations, especially around achievement. And so when your parents want control of you, you feel out of control. So the one thing you feel like you have in control with is your eating. And so you either not eat a lot, right? Or you eat so much, right? And this is especially true among people with anorexia as well. So I'm aware of the time. So I think I'm going to end it there. I'm happy to answer some questions later on for our Q&A. But yeah, those are some of the background information on anorexia and bulimia. So thank you so much. I'm going to punt it back to your hosts there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that, Dr. Del Castillo. Wow, oh my gosh, like I was really listening to that talk. It was very informative. And there are a lot of like factors pala surrounding eating disorders. There are a lot of layers. It's not just simply not eating, overeating. There are a lot of psychological, physical, even like social factors that surround it, you know? And I think like the thing that Dr. Del Castillo just mentioned that really stuck to me is how our families, our like social status actually have an effect on those developing eating disorders. Like the simple comments from our family members, if anybody here has ever experienced that, like small comments like, hey, you've gained a lot of weight since the last time I saw you, or hey, you're eating too much, like tumataba ka, pangit yan, tumataba ka, ganun. Like very prominent here, especially in our Filipino society. Don't you think, Kai? What do you think?
I agree, Ponce. Di ba maski sa small gatherings like birthday, meron talaga tayong mga tita na hindi may iwasan yung mga ganyang mga tanong about sa body natin. And alam mo, partner, even though na topic natin is about eating disorders, to be honest ako, I still lack a lot of knowledge about it. Pero dahil sa discussion of Sir Ronald, I was able to learn about the brief history of eating disorder, the different symptoms and effects of eating disorder to a person who is experiencing it, such as having low esteem and distorted self-image. And I hope yung mga nakikinig sa atin, lahat ng nasa Zoom meeting and sa live, na nanonood ng forum natin, also have a lot of takeaways about the general discussion of two eating disorders. So once again, we would like to thank Dr. Del Castillo for taking the time to share with us very important details that we have to remember regarding eating disorders.
So yes, reminder again, if you have any questions for our speakers, I for one have a lot, but I'm excited for our panel later. Please take note of them first, or we will have a panel discussion later where all of our speakers will answer your questions. Okay, so reminder lang po yun. Also, to open up a deeper discourse about bulimia specifically, we have invited another speaker to share with us their personal experience regarding the said disorder. Okay, so this speaker is named Ms. Kyra Ballesteros. She's a research and mental health advocate. She graduated cum laude under the program AB Communication in Ateneo de Manila University back in 2011. She also took up MA Creative Writing in University of the Philippines back in 2018 and MA Publishing in University College London in 2020. Ms. Kyra has working experiences in Oxford University Press as a business development and commissioning executive and in Pluma, the editor's stylebook with Yabang Pinoy, as an organizer and facilitator. Also, he is the founder of Agos Editorial. So let us now lend our ears to Ms. Kyra Ballesteros.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. So sound check lang. Can everybody hear me? Can you put up your thumbs?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, that's good. Same with your first panelist, Sir Ronald. If you hear any scratching, that's my dog. He's in the room with me. So I apologize for that. I'm also, to be fair, very extremely nervous. So if I talk a little quickly, please excuse me and ask your questions later. I won't, I'm aware of the time, so I'll start right away. Thank you for inviting me to talk about living with an eating disorder. Hopefully you'll pick something up from my lived experience. So we can go ahead to slide 2, please. Thank you. So aside from my professional credentials, I'm also a mental health advocate. I'm the lead writer and researcher for Mental Health PH, and I do my advocacy work online a lot due to the pandemic. I'm also bulimic, and hopefully this talk will help you understand a little bit of what that means. So on slide 3, I'll give you a little bit of background about who I am, aside from when I was younger. So I've always been a little bit chubbier, a little bit thicker, but from a young age, I've always been aware of my body and aware of how it looked. If you're a young child in the Philippines, as most of us were, who had a little bit of weight issues, you would have received comments na pabalang, including ang taba-taba mo, kailan ka papayat, taba-ching-ching. So this made me keenly aware as a young girl of how other girls looked in comparison to me. And I was incentivized to compare myself because adults actively compared my body to others in a bid to motivate me to diet. So much of my early identity was couched and built on the idea that I was the fat girl. I was the fat kid. So the direct effect of that was to develop low self-esteem that stemmed from these issues. It was also made clear to me as a young girl, the insidious idea that there is something wrong with me. I tried to go on my first diet when I was 7 years old of my own volition because of these ideas. Next slide, please. I had anxious episodes as a very young girl, which began when I was 10 to 12 years old, thereabout. I experienced an extreme dislike for my physical body as a whole and more strongly for parts of my body. So they were compounding feelings about my physical body. In particular, I dislike problem areas like my height, my stomach, my arms, the shape of my legs. So these contributed to experiencing anxious episodes on top of going through major depressive episodes, where one of my core beliefs was that there's again something wrong with me. GAD stands for Generalized Anxiety Disorder. I first began to binge purge as a way to control my weight in the wake of not being able to control my eating. So I developed unhealthy or rigid thinking habits, including all or nothing thinking, ruminating. I also exhibited certain disordered eating habits at the onset, including stress eating, restricting, abusing exercise. All of this compounded by the fact that I had perfectionist tendencies. This is one of the personality traits that were touched on in the first panel. I also couldn't start projects or finish them because of my self-esteem issues. By the time I was 17, I was about to enter university to take off my undergraduate degree. And at that point, I thought if I can't lose weight, I'll throw everything up. If I can't control the way I eat, I will simply control how much of it I can put out. I thought that if I couldn't restrict food intake, I would instead perform an act that countered the food intake, which was also something that dovetails with the psychiatric um, with what your first panelist talked about. So for some people, these compensatory behaviors manifest as exercise or abusing laxatives or abusing diuretics. But for me, my first experience was to binge and purge. At the height of my experience, I purged upwards of 5 times a day every time I ate something. I was also fixated on and ruminated about what I ate constantly. So it went on for about 4 years of college, where most of my food was empanada. We had empanada in Ateneo before. It was cheap, it was easy to purge, and the serving was controlled. And I knew that I could throw it up. So sulit siya in all those ways. My experience of the binge purge cycle was reinforced because I received compliments for how I looked. I was finally able to shop at stores without having a problem fitting into these clothes, and I felt that clothes actually looked good on this body for a change. The problem there is there was no end point. There was never any satisfaction. I had a goal in my brain for a certain weight that I wanted to reach and maintain, and I did, but at the risk of becoming anemic once I realized that it was difficult to maintain purging. I started also calorie restricting. Next slide, please. Part of what you wanted me to talk about was help-seeking behavior or how to overcome my eating disorder. The sad truth of it is that it's a long process. I haven't fully recovered. I'm still in recovery. Um, and there are relapses that occur every few months. Help-seeking behavior in the Philippines, for those of us who live with eating disorders, is an exception, not the rule. Because of my history with mood disorders, I was moderately aware of my triggers, my anxious patterns, my unhealthy coping mechanisms, which is how I recognized disordered eating, disordered thinking about food, and bulimia. So when I asked a therapist and a psychiatrist from TMC for help locating a health professional who specialized in eating disorders in the Philippines, they weren't able to recommend anyone who treated adults, which is interesting. So what they could recommend to me were child psychologists. So this confirmed the lack of resources for adults across social classes who must be living with disordered eating and eating disorders. One of the things I did as help-seeking behavior was to study eating disorders myself because I realized that there were a few of these local nuanced resources. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So I also recognized some cultural barriers to help-seeking behavior in the Philippines. The idea that eating disorders are strictly personal issues without an awareness of the effects on the individual, on their family unit, on their behavior and attitudes of the greater media landscape. This is part of where shame comes from. So there's shame attached to not looking a certain way. There's shame attached to not fitting into the same clothes to look a certain way. Part of the problem is that our choice of clothes doesn't include a lot of bigger bodied women. So it's in this sense a question of inclusivity and access. So there's also shame that's attached to being bigger than other girls, shame of having to struggle so much to maintain a certain, ideal weight. There's also shame of eating in public because you are a certain size. You're afraid of being judged for eating despite your size. There's also the stigma of a disordered relationship with food. So I suppose to step back from this discussion, we have to remember that food remains an integral part of managing our relationship with our families, our friends, and our professional colleagues. It's easy to say to a family or to a relative, na, let's go have a drink, let's go have a coffee. That's one way to manage your relationship with them, and the crux of that is food. But when you have an ED or if you suffer through disordered eating, these instances can aggravate and make it difficult for you to engage or function normally. So your eating disorder or your relationship with food, my relationship with food sort of seeps into the way that I am able to navigate social relationships. We provide also comfort through eating together, but these ties and experiences are rarely neutral and may become uncomfortable. So if you think of it this way, every time you gather to have lunch or dinner, that's also a site of extreme discomfort for somebody who might have disordered eating, because you're having to eat with your family who will be able to tell you or to provide criticism as you're going through this. So it can be incredibly uncomfortable. When I was at the peak of my bulimic episodes, Christmas and holidays were particularly difficult because there was no way to control the eating. There was no way to just sort of retreat from the social affair, you know. So during Christmas and holidays, I remember having to come up with many excuses to continue my binge purge cycle because I had eaten so much. This can lead to feelings of isolation due to embarrassment. There are also questions of kung maarte ka lang ba with your food, which leads to the question of how can we better understand our relationship with eating and about food when our concept of vanity and kaartehan are also a sort of part of what we have to navigate. I'll also touch on our ambivalence about eating disorders because in our society in the Philippines, thinness has a value by itself. So we ascribe a certain end value to being a certain weight, having a certain kind of body. And in this sense, disordered eating can become normalized in our culture and even celebrated. Again, being afraid of or wary of certain kinds of food like rice or carbs or fries. If you're saying you don't want to eat rice because you don't want to gain weight, you're praising restrictive diets, or diets can be viewed as self-care. But this can also be taken to an extreme, you know. So there are also members of nuclear families who may even disregard health risks of eating disorders and the mental aspect and emotional aspects of eating disordered and disordered eating when it helps people maintain uh, a certain ideal body, for example. um, there are instances where people just will say, if you tell them you have disordered eating habits, na kumain ka na lang, or wag ka na lang kumain, as though it were that easy. Next slide, please. There are also some behaviors and attitudes that reinforce untenable and unsustainable body standards that are specific to us in the Philippines. So, thinking of the pandemic, we have a lot of isolation. Isolation is a big issue. It's a feeling that you are unable to talk about your struggles with food, body image, and the expectations that come with these experiences. So, this comes from a lack of awareness in general, and more specifically, maybe the lack of a vocabulary to speak about these experiences as Filipinos. And this can be a form of isolation. These issues being invisible or not as visible on social spaces is another form of isolation. Because if you are struggling with eating, or if you're struggling with intrusive thoughts about eating, saan mo siya ilalagay? Who can you talk to about them that will have the capacity to understand and to recognize that it's a pattern and it's not just you being anxious or scared. Um, yeah. So another more specific kind of isolation is during the pandemic, when you are literally alone at home. Being alone with food can also be a massive trigger for your eating disorder, for your anxiety, for your major depression, and for your eating habits. So what I also found in my own experience was that there's also, aside from shame, a lot of guilt associated with having disordered eating habits. If you've ever been told, ubusin mo yung kanin mo, maraming namamatay na magsasaka, that's That's something that it puts the burden on you. What if you're just not hungry anymore? So there are these things that come with our language that may contribute um, to our relationship with food becoming what it is. There's also the idea that your body is something you get under control, something that you mold or shape as a kind of calling card or as a visual shorthand for success. It becomes your body a marker of success. For example, having six pack abs or always working towards a leaner, toner body. So, this idea, this image of a perfect body can also be insidious and harmful. You know, sometimes if you're living within precarity, if you don't have a good stable job, these expectations can't be met to maintain a certain kind of body. The corollary is also true that if you look a certain way, then you are not taking care of yourself. If you're a little heavier, if you're too thin, etc., you are viewed, or you can be viewed, as somehow less health oriented, less healthy, less body conscious, etc. And these are all, non sequiturs. They don't necessarily follow. Next slide, please. Sorry, that's my dog. Please ignore. There are also certain economic barriers to help seeking behavior, which are often issues of access itself. Yeah. So, for example, there are unequal distribution of resources. So treatment plans can be expensive. That means the onus of recovery is on the individual and their family. Individuals will therefore have varied means to access reliable information, and requiring, for example, nutritionists and dietitians, and the price of healthcare can become difficult to bear. Give me one moment. I'm just going to open the door. I am very sorry for my dog. So we were talking about treatment plans and issues of access. This means that not everyone can receive the kind of treatment or care, or even be able to look for treatment or care for eating disorders in the Philippines. Everything has a price if you live in the Philippines and you have no health care plan. For example, another example of unequal distribution is location. Mental health centers and mental health professionals are unevenly spread across our archipelago. We also talk about cultural and language issues, for example, and as well as religious beliefs. Who can be served when most of the centers are in urban centers? If you think about where the hospitals that can accommodate these concerns are, you also have to think about where the most vulnerable Filipinos are. There's also the failure to recognize those who are most vulnerable. There's disordered eating habits are much more prevalent than we realize because they've been normalized. So we have to think about, what about those who have jobs, who are night shift workers, gig workers, for example, whose employment make it difficult to access help. A final thing that we have to consider as an economic barrier is relative poverty. How do we make sure that healthcare and teleconsult services are available where Filipinos are if we cannot guarantee reliable and affordable internet? So these things aren't something that we consider in a health class, but we should, because it's all about providing access. So poverty and living conditions are also contributors to mental health issues, and we have to spend more time understanding how these issues affect our relationship with food, our bodies, and our attitudes. If you think about pantawid gutom food, it's essential as a way to prevent hunger, but it may also cause malnutrition. So these are also part and parcel of how we understand the relationship with food. Next slide, please. Yeah. So as I told you earlier, part of my coping mechanism was to begin my own research, or to begin research on Philippine eating disorders. And this is part of what I've gathered so far. I've had 66 total respondents between the ages of 36 years old and 16 years old. Majority of them are female, about 87.9%. But I have only 12% male respondents. That means 58 female respondents and 8 male respondents. Of these people who responded, majority did not seek professional help. But of those who did not, not seek medical help, the 51 respondents, 31 said that they did want to find a professional. Of those who sought mental health professionals at the time that they answered my survey, 10 respondents of the 15 were able to consult with a medical professional to cope with their ED, and 10 respondents were not given any medication to cope with their EDs. Respondents report that the medication and treatment plans they received were meant to address mood disorders that were commonly reported in symphony or in parallel to their eating disorders, including, but not limited to, anxiety, major depression, and um, BPD or bipolar disorder. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see these facts come out. For those who did consult with a medical professional, they consulted various people like university guidance counselors, psychiatrists, dietitians and therapists, child psychologists. But for those who recognized their disordered eating habits had become an eating disorder, they addressed it through personal interventions like avoiding their scale, taking up intuitive eating. But these were performed by the individual themselves, which doesn't address the social isolation that these respondents might have experienced. If you're curious, the most commonly cited symptoms of the disorder was repeated episodes of binge eating, followed by episodes of self-starvation. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay. So some insights that I'd like to share as well before we sort of wrap up this short talk is that there was a relief or happiness when they started to recognize they had an eating disorder because they realized it helped them lose weight, become thinner. For those who saw psychiatrists, they revealed that medication they received were mostly to treat symptoms of other things, including anxiety disorders, etc. But it just shows that there are no treatment plans for EDs in the Philippines as yet. I also noticed that there were few research studies done in particular in the intersections that can create a nuanced picture of eating disorders in the Philippines. There are no age-related studies as far as I know. There are no longer-term studies, or if there were, they were few and far between. And there was only one respondent from my survey who received cognitive behavioral therapy as part of their treatment plan. And true enough, as our first panelist said, a lot of them were provided with meal supplements to help them gain weight. Yeah. So slide 11, how can we approach and help people that we know who have EDs in the first place? Next slide, please. I think this is the final slide. Yeah. So I've broken it down to 3 specific elements, an individual approach, a local approach, and approaching your media spaces. So as an individual at a personal level, creating a change in the culture is an incremental process. So we have to start destigmatizing fat, which involves changing our perception, which is what we have in control. And we can do that by becoming more self-aware and educating ourselves about body image issues. In the local or community level, including our immediate families, please notice how you think and speak and behave around people, and change where you can, and talk about it. Be an active listener for people who might need some help. When I talk about holding space, it's being open to talking about something and being open to having somebody talk to them about their own experiences without judgment. Yeah, so especially making space for difficult feelings is important. In terms of your media spaces, being a mindful consumer or having mindful engagement. So clean your feed, protect yourself if necessary, be purposeful with the images that you engage and repost or amplify, is a step in the right direction. Yeah. So I know that's a lot. I'll be happy to take any questions, but that's the end of this segment. Thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, sorry, my eating disorder research is currently ongoing. These are my social links. I do write about eating disorders in the Philippines. My forte is through creative writing, of course, so I want to fill that gap where there's where people aren't able to have space to talk about their experiences in longer form writing. There's also the Eating Disorder Awareness Philippines support group on Facebook if you ever need it. So this is actually the end. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Miss Kyra, for being so brave enough to share with us your journey. Tunay na nakabubusog ng puso naman yung sharing na yun, Ponce, no? Grabe, Miss Kyra, sobrang inspirational and ang tapang-tapang niyo po. And the fact na ngayon you can just share your stories, your journey with ED to us is very much admirable. And I also heard kanina na you're currently po ba doing a study on eating disorders on the Philippines to also spread awareness about the disorder and discuss how our culture here in our country prevents people with eating disorder to seek for professional help. You also mentioned po kanina that at the beginning of your eating disorder, you have no idea where or to who to seek professional help from. So, may lack of access talaga sa Philippines. May iba pa na tao dito sa Philippines na sinasabi, kaartehan lang yan, kumain ka, or dinidisregard yung feelings ng taong may eating disorder. Kaya naman, I believe na yung eating disorder ay marapat at dapat talagang napag-uusapan sa ating bansa. Don't you agree, partner?
Yes, I completely agree with you, Kai. Thank you so much, Miss Kyra. To be honest, I was really moved by your sharing because as someone who is currently going through the same thing, it's been years. And like the fact that I now have someone here in the Philippines who actually knows what I go through is very comforting. I admire your strength and your knowledge on this topic, and I'm very grateful to have met someone like you, even if it's just through this, because the awareness that you spread is truly remarkable. And yeah, I'm just at a loss for words. I'm very grateful for your sharing. Thank you so much. So yeah, before we move on to the last speaker, may we ask, kamusta naman kayo dyan, guys? We would like to hear a few of your insights. Like, anyone? Anyone who would like to share?
Guys, yung mga hindi naka-on, kung baka tawagin namin kayo to hear if you really...
Tatawagin namin kayo.
Oo. Open na ng cam. Baka merong gustong mag-share. Type nyo lang yung surname nyo sa comment ay sa chat box.
Just share some insights like throughout the two speakers so far. Have you learned anything? Have any reactions? Whatever type of reaction? Okay, so parang nobody's volunteering. So you know what we're gonna do, Kai? You know what we're gonna do.
Mamili na lang tayo. Ay, naku, binabantayan ko yung mga hindi naka-open cam, ha?
Okay, go.
How about si Miss Cruz na lang kaya?
Okay, so earlier, yung ano ko lang is that the first two speakers pa lang, sobrang dami na nating learnings. And there's really, a lack of knowledge, lack of education regarding the topic here in the Philippines. Like, when we were looking for potential speakers, ang dami nagsasabi na they think that they're manifesting symptoms of these EDs. However, they're not diagnosed. And kaya nga nabanggit ni Sir Ronald, diba, that eating disorders or eating-related issues here in the country is not well documented. And now it's a good thing that Ms. Kyra is pursuing a research related sa EDs. And aside from it, it's very important that we're sensitive enough whenever we're making remarks. And yung is that kaya anxiety, diba? Like, kapag sinabing ganito, ganyan, and ayun, ano pa ba? So, imagine, first two speakers pa lang, and ang dami na nating learning. So, I can just wait for the next speaker and later sa panel discussion. I know that we all have our questions, and mamaya kapag in-entertain sila, for sure, mas mabubusog pa tayo ng learnings and insights.
And thank you, Ms. De La Cruz. I agree kay Ms. De La Cruz, no? So, aming natututunan. Partida, dalawang speakers pa lang ang nakakausap natin, ha? So, anyone else who would like to speak up? Guys, don't be shy.
Yeah, guys, don't be shy. And as for the sharing of Miss De La Cruz, like, I also agree. there is a lot of stigma surrounding eating disorders here in the Philippines. Like, most people think, mostly adults, like, they think kaartehan lang, ganon, papaganda lang, ganyan. So, okay, I think we have another person who is willing to share their insights. Miss Leonardo, would you like to share po? Please open your mic and camera.
Hi. So far talaga, I'm enjoying this webinar so far. Sobra, like, wow. And, sa totoo lang, I agree with your insights din. Like, I'm really aware about eating disorders, but dito sa Philippines talaga, sobrang, ngayon lang ako na-open na hindi pala siya ganun ka big topic dito. So, sobrang eye-opener. I mean, ganun, sobrang sweet. I'm at a loss for words. So, sobrang eye-opener talaga nitong webinar na to. So, excited talaga ako din sa third speaker. So, ayun.
Okay, so thank you so much for sharing that, Mikey. I'm really happy that you're enjoying our webinar so far. I hope everyone else is enjoying also. So yeah, thank you so much. Alam mo, partner, ito yung main objective of our forum, no? To make sure that our audience is learning more about the topic, and we are opening up avenues to talk about these disorders. Kasi nga, eating disorders are rarely talked about here in the Philippines, right?
I agree, Ponce. And for our audience, just in case you have any questions, alam ko nangangatin na yung mga daliri nyo na mag-type ng mga questions para sa panel interview. Save them for now, and we will entertain them later during our panel discussion. So, a while ago, Miss Kyra talked about bulimia. This time, our next guest will impart her experiences as well as to provide another perspective about eating disorders, specifically anorexia and eating disorder in general. So our third and last speaker graduated from the University of the Philippines under the program BS Community Nutrition. In 2014, she also finished a ballet major in the Philippine High School for the Arts, and she was a speaker in various seminars and webinars such as Puritan's Pride, MaxiCare, Concept Store Nutrition, Adidas Nutrition Webinar, F45, Global Shapers Davao Hub, and Max International. Now, let us all give the floor to Ms. Jo Margaret F. Sebastian, RNP.
Thank you for my full name introduction. Hi guys, hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. Anyways, I know this session's probably been a heavy session, so I'll do my best to make it heavier. Char, joke lang. Okay, let's start. I'm gonna just discuss my struggle with an eating disorder. And to most people who might see me or might see me maybe on social media or anything, you probably wouldn't feel like I was somebody who would struggle with one. But that's the thing about it. There's no look to somebody who is struggling. Somebody in a big body, somebody in a small body, they could all be struggling. And next slide, please. I want you to raise your hand if you resonate with the following statements, okay? No judgment here, so don't worry about it. We're all struggling with something, so there's no judgment at all. Let's start with the first one. Can you get the next slide? I'm always thinking about food. Do you feel like this? Like, and not in the sense of like, you're a chef. Oh my God, I have this new creation, right? Not like that. But in the sense where you're always thinking about food. Breakfast pa lang. Oh my God, kaya makapag-lunch. Lunch na, oh my God. Kaya makain ng dinner, right? Like, girl, I've been stressing with that before. Okay, the next one, please. I fear certain foods because I feel like they'll make me gain weight. Do you feel like that? There are specific foods where you feel like if you eat them, you just feel like they're automatically going to make you gain weight. That's a big struggle that I've had too. Next slide, please. I feel like I have to earn my food. Like I have to work out extra. I have to move. I have to do something good first before I can eat. Like I have to finish my homework first before I can eat this, right? Do you ever feel like you have to earn your food? So next one, please. I have to work out, so I burn the food I ate. Sample, yesterday, it was we celebrated my birthday. My birthday was a long time, but it was a late celebration. Anyways, we ate cake. Normally, I would feel the need to have to work out extra if I ate cake yesterday. Do you ever feel that? Next one, please. I feel guilty when I eat, so I end up eating more. You have that? You eat a cookie. Oh, you're like, oh my gosh, why did I eat that cookie? Okay, I'll just restart tomorrow. Ubusin ko na lang today. And then again, bukas. Promise. Ganon. Okay. Next one, please. I feel happy when I lose weight, no matter what reason. Right? Whether it's you got sick, whether it's you weren't able to eat because you're stressed, you feel happy because you lost weight. Next one, please. I am jealous of people who can eat whatever they want and not worry about how they look. Oh, the jealousy is real. But there are some people that you see they're just eating their food, they're enjoying, and they just look so carefree. And then you're like, bakit ako hindi? Diba? Next one, please. I think about my body or how I could change my body every day. How many times do you look in the mirror and you're like, sana mas mapayat ako, or sana iba yung itsura ng ganito ko, yung chan ko sana ganito, ganon, ganon. How many times do you do that? How many times do you catch yourself doing that? The next one, please. I diet on Monday only to fall off and restart. No? Monday, New Year, new month, everything new, restart. Kasi after a while, hindi kaya. Right? Been there. And the last one, I feel like I have to look a certain way to be accepted. I feel like I have to be smaller. I have to take up less space. I have to be thinner. I have to have nicer skin. I have to be whiter. All of these things. You feel like you have to look a certain way so you can feel accepted. Can we go to the next slide, please? I have felt all of those. Okay, I've been through all of those. And I want to tell you that you don't have to feel this way all the time. And you don't actually have to feel that way at all. You don't have to feel that way anymore. Okay? And we're going to learn a little bit of how we can do that. So let's start with, who am I? Right? Next slide, please. I'm not standing. I'm in front of you right now, and you're probably wondering, who is this person talking to me and telling me that they have experienced the same things I have experienced? Who is she? Oh, wow, sure. Anyways, next slide, please. So my name is Jo Sebastian. You can just call me Joe. I'm actually 24 now. I forgot to edit that. I'm a registered nutritionist and dietitian. I danced ballet for 10 years. I love donuts. And I've struggled with an eating disorder or disordered eating ever since I was 13. So just like most of us probably who struggle with an eating disorder in the Philippines, I was never diagnosed because you can't find a resource. You can't easily find a resource because it's very taboo, like everybody has said, right? It's something, and the reason why it's taboo is because it's normalized. You don't even know you're struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating patterns because you think it's normal, right? Because eating disorders or disordered eating patterns are passed on from family members from generations. Did you know that you are more likely to be predisposed to an eating disorder if someone in your family has it? And the reason why I'm saying this is, isipin nyo, when you were a kid, or even now in your family, do you find that your parents and your family members are afraid of rice, afraid of how they look, they're gaining weight, right? Or your family and the friends, the people who you have around you, they struggle with that too. And we internalize or feel like it's a normal thing. We feel like it's normal to cut out foods. It's normal to overexercise. It's normal to do these things because everyone does it. Because it's been normalized, right? Anyways, I'll get to that in a bit, but I want to first share my story so that we can get a little bit of a background as to what I struggled with and what triggered it. Okay, so let's start. Next slide, please. This is me. Yeah, I'm sharing my photos. Close style, guys. Okay, so this is me in 2009. I was eating a cupcake. I was carefree. I was living the life. 2010, I was at the beach wearing my own little one piece, having some fun. 2010, I don't know how I made that face, but that's the face I made. And I went to camp, right? In all of these years, I never really struggled with my body image. Yes, minsan maririnig ko ang laki ng tiyan mo, right, from your friends or people around you. But I never thought that as something that would affect me. Because I was like, okay, it's cool. I'm happy, right? I was a carefree person. I didn't care about how I looked. It was, next slide please, the time that I hit high school when I was dancing ballet for high school, arts high school, where pinila kami, tapos inisa-isa kami, sabi na, ikaw, kailangan mo mag-lose ng weight, ikaw, kailangan mo ayusin mo yung leeg mo, ikaw, ganun, 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 ganun. I was 13, and that was what I heard. I was just there to dance ballet, and yet I was being shunned for my body, for being a growing body, especially, right? I was 13. I was still in the prime of my growth. I don't know if that's true, but I was still growing as a human being. And then I was told na ang laki-laki ng tiyan ko. So what was the first thing I thought of? Okay, I'm not going to eat rice anymore because that's what we're normally told to believe. So I stopped eating rice, and I pretty much stopped eating almost or altogether. I ate 8 bananas a day, but I would struggle with binging in the weekends because by the time it was the weekends, I was so hungry and I was eating all the time. And I would be so rude to my family because I was so hungry, right? Hungry taken it to 10 levels because I wasn't eating at all. And I would blame myself because I was binging in the weekends, and I would think, bakit ang hina mo? Bakit wala kang disiplina? Bakit ka ganyan? Right? That's how I would talk to myself because I felt like I was doing something wrong or I wasn't doing the right things for my body, right? And I was always praised for losing weight. When I was losing weight, everybody was like, wow, you're so thin now. And I'm like, okay, all right, sige. So it's working. Not eating is working. I'm not going to do it anymore, right? We are praised because they don't know what we're going through. And then, next slide, please. So this ran on until 2013, 2014. I was still not eating. I even went through meal replacements and all of those things. I looked like I'm smiling, but in the weekends I was binging and I was starving and I was over-exercising. There's such a thing called exercise bulimia, where you will be over-exercising to compensate for what you ate. I was doing 100 squats every time I ate a piece of crackers, and I'm like, oh my god, squat, squat, squat. Right? I felt so guilty. I felt so ashamed for eating. Looking back, I'm like wondering how I even sustained the physical activity I maintained when I wasn't controlling food, because it was a lot. So it's really stunted my growth. As you can see, I don't have any boobs. But in the next slide, when I was in recovery, or when I realized that I wanted to recover, can we go to the next slide, please? I gained a lot of weight. And then my boobs came out. Yeah. This is just one of the things I noticed kasi na yung boobs ko lumabas. Doon ako nagulat kasi. Di ako sanay. Anyway, alright. Let's backtrack. Anyway, I gained weight. I gained about 30 to 40 pounds because I was no longer dancing. And I decided to focus on recovery. I decided to allow myself to eat foods, and I kept gaining weight. And as I gained weight, I felt like I had let myself go. Right? I felt so ashamed of my body because now I heard people saying, oh, what happened to you? Or like, oh, si Ate Jo, tumataba na daw. Ganon. Parang, wow, right? This is another time when body comments now emphasize something that you're going through, right? I was told that I was looking bigger and all of these things. And looking back, I didn't even look big at all, right? There was like, and not to say that it's bad or anything like that to be a certain way in your body, but my perception of myself was so different from what it actually was because of the comments that I was hearing, because my body had changed. And do you expect me to look like I was 13 for the rest of my life? Like, could that be something that I had to live with? Right? Of course, my body is going to change. So fast forward to 2017. This is me at the time I decided to start a fitness journey, a weight loss journey. I wanted to do a 30-day challenge because I was like, okay, we're going to post this on YouTube. It's going to go well. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be a healthy person. So I started working out, started doing intermittent fasting, started doing all of these things. I thought I was healthy, but I did not realize that I was becoming super duper obsessed with my scale and with everything. I would weigh myself every day. 0.2, I gained 0.2 pounds. Oh my gosh. Okay. Cut. We gotta do something different. We gotta exercise a little bit more. Something's going wrong, right? Or anything like that. And this was the point where I felt like I didn't have control over my life. So I thought the only way I would have control over my life was if I lost weight. Because we put so much value on changing our body. We think that the only thing we can control is our body, when in fact it is one of the hardest things we can control, because your body is going to change over your lifetime. And I was struggling, even though, going to the next slide, please. Even though I lost a lot of weight, people would call me a inspiration naman. Right? Parang, oh, you're so fit, ganon. They didn't know why I looked like this. They didn't know what I was going through. Because we so easily comment on other people's bodies without knowing what they're going through. You don't know if you're commenting on somebody, you're actually fueling their eating disorder, or you're crushing them for doing something like taking care of themselves. And although it looks like I'm taking care of myself, I was not eating, and I was over-exercising, and I was constantly thinking about food. Also, something I did pala in high school, laxative abuse, where I would take 2 laxatives every day to hopefully make me lose weight when I just pooped and it hurt my stomach, right? So this was a struggle. Now to the next slide, please. It was only last year when I decided that, screw it, right? I'm so sick and tired of constantly worrying about how I look. Right? It's taking up way too much of my time, because I thought that if I looked thin, I would be accepted in the world. But even when I reached my goal weight, I still wanted to lose more, because it wasn't about my body at all. It was about how I saw my body and how the media or how the world made me think my body looked like. Right? I could change my body. I could be the skinniest person on earth, but if I didn't ask myself what I actually needed, I would not be happy. Because we put so much pressure on everyone to look a certain way. And we put so much value into how we look being the reason why we'll be happy. Right? So we think, okay, if I have abs, then I'll be happy. Have you said that before? Basta may abs ako, okay na, masaya na ako. Do you know that abs are so hard to maintain because you need a very low body fat percentage? And in real life, those are unrealistic standards to maintain, especially if you're a female. That's what we are being put up in the world. We're saying that you have to have abs to be healthy, you have to be skinny to be happy, all of these things. So next slide, please. Why do we put ourselves through this? Why do we constantly cycle back and forth? Why do we put ourselves through this? Next slide, please. It's because of diet culture, which is, definition on the next slide, please. A belief system that values weight, shape, and size over well-being. You see this on social media. You see this when people post their transformation photos. You see this when people lose weight over the holidays. You see how the media glorifies Rebel Wilson for losing weight, but shames celebrities who gain weight, even though they don't have any idea what they're going through. Si Angel Locsin, sobrang na-shame, diba? They don't know what you don't know what she's going through. You don't know if she's struggled with an eating disorder. But since society has put so much value on changing your body, we now value this over health and well-being. Weight loss doesn't always equal to health, because the way we lose weight is often very unsustainable. Right? Diet culture is promoting this idea that when you lose weight, you will be happy. But it doesn't talk about the other things in life, like having friends, having a life, or focusing your energy on things that aren't related to your body. So in our next slide, disordered eating habits have been normalized. Habits like you need to earn your food, laxative abuse, labeling foods as good or bad, only having sweets for 3 p.m., cheat days, no eating after 6 p.m., working off the food you ate, skipping meals after eating a lot. They're praised and they're normalized. Have you ever not eaten, had like 2 plates of food in front of you, one was a salad, one was a pizza, and then you chose the salad, and then somebody was like, wow, galing naman, disciplina, ganon, right? And then if you ate cookies, they'd be like, talaga, yun yung kakainin mo. You sure? I don't know. No? Right? The thing is that disordered eating habits are equated with discipline. We think that if we're able to lose weight fast and quick, or if we're able to follow this diet, we're disciplined. But if we don't do it, we're failures. And I want to tell you, you're not a failure if you can't follow a diet. It's not about you. It's not your fault. It's the fact that we are trying to fit ourselves into boxes that were not meant for us anyway. It's the fact that we're trying to eat a way that is not made for us. Okay? So Here's a few things. Let's go to the next slide about dieting that they won't tell you about. Next slide, please. When you do a diet, you will have a love-hate relationship with yourself. You will have difficulty focusing, especially in school. You feel cold, difficulty sleeping, irritability, hair loss, lack of energy, obsessed with calories, food guilt. The only thing about dieting they tell you is that you will be happy and that you will be thin. They don't tell you about these other things that will happen, especially when you're eating very, very low for your body. Next slide, please. Here's a sample. If you're struggling with hair loss, it could be because you are restricting your intake. And then this is an image of somebody who was struggling with eating disorder. And when they started fueling themselves, their hair finally came back, right? Next slide, please. So why do we do it? Why do we put ourselves through it? Because we're sold shortcuts. We're sold false promises that if you lose quick, you will have a flat belly, easy. We're sold the glorification of weight loss, that it will solve all of your problems. And we are sold in the media that if you gain weight, it's not good for you. You will not look good. And we're holding this standard to ourselves to change our body when our bodies are made to look the way they are. Right? We're fighting our bodies rather than working with it. We're constantly hiding cellulite when it's actually a secondary sexual female characteristic. I don't know if the order of that was correct. We're hiding the hair in our armpits, which are really normal things, right? We are hiding the stretch marks that we have, which are signs of the things that our body has gone through. We're hiding pimples. We're hiding pores. We're hiding everything. When we don't have to do that because they are normal. Every single person in this world has those things, but we feel the pressure that we're not supposed to have them. The reason why we do this is because if we weren't insecure, what would the media sell you? Right? If we weren't afraid of gaining weight, who would sell these diet pills? Right? We're sold this idea because there has to be a way for us or for people to profit off us, to profit against our insecurities. Next slide. If you fail, it's your fault. That's what the world is telling you. That if you're not able to stick to a regimen, if you're not able to stick to a diet, it's your fault. Right? So, next slide, please. Now we question our worth. If it's my fault for doing all of these things or for allowing myself to look this way, what else in the world am I failing at? Because we equate our worth to our bodies. So, next slide, please. Recovery is hard. But I'm going to tell you something, it's worth it. Why? Because imagine a life where you're no longer spending all of your time thinking about your body. You're not stressing about food. You're not spending so much time on those. One of the things I love to say is that less time thinking about how to change your body, more time thinking about how to change the world, how to beat the system. Diba? Right? The world wants us to keep worrying about how we look, because if we spend so much time worrying on trying to change our bodies, we will have less time checking out all of the terrible things out there. So let's focus instead of trying to change our bodies, but trying to change how we take care of our bodies. Don't starve yourself because you want to look a certain way. Eat and fuel your body so you can feel good. Don't work out so you can eat later. Work out so you can celebrate your body and you can feel strong. It's a struggle. It takes time. I'm not telling you that you just switch your mentality right now. Bukas okay ka na. No? It's constant reminders, constant unlearning of the things that we have been taught over the years. So dieting robs you of your life. Don't let it take any more of your time. Don't let it take any more of your time. So next slide, please. The one thing I always love to say is that you always deserve to eat. Whatever food that is, whatever time of the day, whatever you're feeling, you always deserve to eat. Okay? Because you're amazing and your bodies are amazing. And you know what? You're the only person in the world who has that body. Literally. Right? So take care of it. And don't give a crap about what other people think, because the only opinion that matters is yourself. It's hard, I know, easier said than done. But we'll get to that. We'll get there. Okay, thank you guys.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Jo, for allowing us to listen to your story. Again, I am so inspired. And I'm so like, I love your energy po, super. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for doing that.
That's all I have.
So yeah, I learned a lot. Like there is, as the other speaker said, like the people who surround us really have like a great effect on how we see ourselves also, and it shouldn't be that way. Also, like there is a lot of things that we don't really know that's beneath the surface, so always be mindful and sensitive of our comments. Ayun nga po, like what Miss Jo said, we don't really know if we're actually healing an eating disorder, helping someone develop an eating disorder, or just making them feel bad about their natural physical form. Everybody is beautiful, guys. So yeah, what about you, Kai?
I agree. While listening na kay Miss Jo kanina, siya sharing niya, I remember that one song from Demi Lovato, who also had a past history of disordered eating, entitled I Love Me. So, hindi ko nakakantahin na. Pero may lyrics doon na, why do I compare myself to everyone? I always got my finger onto self-destruct. I wonder when I love me is enough. Minsan kasi talaga dadating tayo sa point na matatanong natin sa sarili natin. Like, why do I keep on pressuring myself? Why I'm not slim? Why I'm not this? Why I'm not that? Hindi natin ma-realize na loving ourselves, appreciating our bodies and capabilities, and syempre by having a good support na din. Like napanood ko sa isang YouTube ni Miss Jo, yung talk niya with her sister. And I think that can really help us to go through and overcome our hardship. And I also agree with Miss Jo, no, na understanding and recognizing what you are going through is also important. So again, thank you, Miss Jo, for that amazing sharing. And now we're going to have our panel discussion. We are calling again Dr. Del Castillo, Miss Kyra, Miss Jo Ballesteros to help us entertain and answer the questions from our audience.
Okay, yeah, so feel free to ask your questions to our speakers by sending your surname in the chat box. I repeat your surname. Don't be shy. When we call your name, please open your mic and state your question. Let's begin for the panel discussion. Okay, so guys, anybody who has a question for our professionals here? Nahihiya pa sila.
Mukhang na-overwhelm sila eh, Ponce. Pero huwag kayong mahiya, guys.
Yeah, okay. If you want, guys, I can start. Like, I have a lot of questions for our speakers, actually. Like, so my first question po, so bulimia, anorexia, those are like the most common types of eating disorders. And I've actually done some research about eating disorders myself. I would just like to ask, what do you guys think about the concept of body dysmorphia? If you're aware of that. So, ayun po yung question ko. Ano po yung body dysmorphia and how does it accompany the other two eating disorders discussed? Ayun.
So Ronald, I think you should answer this one first because you're the professional.
Okay. Body dysmorphia is also it's rare, and it can be a related phenomena, if you will. Basically, body dysmorphia is it can be related to body image, but it's usually where you think you have some kind of flaw in your appearance, where you are worrying a lot about it, but more importantly, it's not noticeable to other people. I have in my I don't really do clinical work anymore. I primarily do policy work and research work. But in excuse me, in the times that I've done clinical work, I've met only two previous patients with a full-on body dysmorphia. One she had a freckle on her arm. And for the longest time, I thought she was psychotic because I did not see what she was worried about. And I thought she was worried about something that did not exist. And right, she was seeing something that wasn't there. And I thought, that can't be right because she's relatively young. She has no history of psychosis in her family. And other concerns that might be related to a psychotic disorder. Then it occurred to me that maybe this is someone who is experiencing this rather very rare experience or a phenomena. And so we were able to arrive at body dysmorphia. Another one was also a young man who worked out a lot, quite regularly. And he thought he did not have good calves on both his feet. Like they were not as big or as good as he perceived it as other people. And so if he was regularly going to the gym, that was something that was feeding the worry, the anxiety he had about the fact that he did not have as good as calves as he perceived other people to have. So he actually planned to have surgery so he can have bigger calves, right? So again, so that dysmorphia is a distortion where you spend a lot of time worrying about a flaw in your appearance that for the rest of us, we don't notice or we don't think of it as a flaw, or perhaps it's something very minor. Common in both men and women as well, but especially among, unfortunately, among young women. Yeah. Rare as it is.
Yeah. I guess I know a little bit about body dysmorphia, but more about dysmorphic behaviors, or more of the distortions that surround my own body. I've also noticed sort of the same tricks of the mind, or the same sort of the same tics in other people, if that makes sense, just because I've been more aware of it. For example, in my own family, I have family members who are very body conscious. So it's not body dysmorphia per se, but they fixate on acne, for example, or they fixate on a certain form of leanness. So I feel like part of the problem with eating disorders in general in the Philippines is that we generally don't have this well of information from which we can take that we can refer to, so that we can more readily recognize maybe these behaviors. And then once we do start to have that bit of information, then it sort of comes popping out, you sort of start seeing it. I'm sure Jo has also spoken about this in her own YouTube videos that I've seen. So perhaps she can also comment on how, certain normal types of behavior can be dysmorphic as well.
Ooh, it's me. Okay. Oh my gosh, thank you for watching my video. But I do feel like we all have some form of like dysmorphia for our body, right? It might not be clinical or like extreme, but I feel like it's really because of society and the way that it really makes us think of our bodies, right? Things that have been normalized or told that are bad. Simple things like being bloated or having belly rolls, right? These things are so hyped up by society as something we have to change that we end up feeling like our body is wrong in all sorts, in some way, right? I think it's mostly, the biggest part is really how we think of our bodies rather than it being the actual body itself and how we're made to think of our bodies, right? Because you have like ads, they're like, oh, get rid of cellulite, or like this and that. The history of cellulite was actually that it was first thought at first it was confused with cellulitis, which is like an inflammation of the skin. So people thought you had to get rid of it. And then magazines started putting it up and being like, get rid of cellulite, do this, do that, right? And now all of a sudden we're like, oh God, my God, I have cellulite, something's wrong with me, right? All of a sudden we see normal features in our body as something that is terrible because our media is constantly bringing that up to us. Like, you're bloated, mukha ka namang buntis, gano'n. Parang, oh my God, so hindi pala normal na maging bloated unless buntis ako. Parang gano'n, right? Or, oh my gosh, you have body hair, that's so gross. Oh my God, who doesn't have body hair? Like, diba? Those things that we're constantly being told are not normal when they're in fact very normal. And like I said a while ago, the reason why they're really pushing this is because how are they going to sell products? How are they going to profit off us if we're not insecure about our bodies? Right? Who's going to buy cellulite cream if you don't feel like cellulite is a problem? Who's going to buy laxatives or waist trainers if you don't feel like having a not hourglass body is a problem? Right? So I feel like in some form we're all struggling to see our body for how it is because we're constantly what do you call this? We're constantly exposed to the media and people telling us that something is wrong with our body. So yeah, thanks.
Can I just add on to that? I really like how Joe is able to make these connections across several disciplines. So there's media, but there's also an awareness of mental health issues, and there's also an awareness of consumption culture and conspicuous consumption, which is something that, like it or not, it's something that we can't sort of unbuy into. And I'd just like to point out that even though we can recognize that our media landscape and our involvement in media via social media and other forms, those things are they're not voluntary. They're sort of fixtures of the way that we navigate our spaces right now, especially right now. So it's easier to say that this is something that I am exposed to, but it's much harder to be able to address the effects of images on you, which is why I have to go back to more purposeful engagement of media. So if you're already aware that the media that you consume might be leading to dysmorphic thoughts, dysmorphic behaviors, then it's something that you might be able to curate for yourself. So if you can't change the media environment, which as individuals will be very, it won't be easy, we have to be more aware or more purposeful of our consumption. So yeah. So doon natin pagtatagpiin yung consumption natin and yung place natin as a consumer and a viewer with our advocacy in mental health, for example.
Okay, thank you so much po to our speakers. Grabe lahat po kayo sinagot question ko. Okay, so I think there's someone else who wants to ask a question. Miss Milena.
Hello po. Can you hear me?
Yes, Milena.
Thank you po. Before I'll ask things, I just want to thank the speakers who are with us today. And I do have two questions. For the first one is for Miss Kyra or for Sir Del Castillo. We're talking about here with this eating disorders. We're talking about losing weight, and gaining weight. But then, what if I'm scared to eat like fast food and junk food like pizza, burger, and chips? Not because I'm afraid to gain weight, but because I'm afraid to be unhealthy. And I think these foods are unhealthy in the first place. But then just eating, for example, a piece or one burger, it makes me feel anxious already about being unhealthy. So is it something also to be concerned about? And what can I do in order to change that kind of perspective? And for Miss Jo, my question is: you mentioned earlier about intermittent fasting. And I think you experienced undergoing intermittent fasting. And I watched a video online that says it was actually from a doctor. He said that this kinds of diet, the intermittent, the paleo diets, these are actually fads because it will benefit you for a short time, but then it restricts you to eat a certain age group, so it will not be healthy in the long run. So what the better thing to do is to just have a healthy relationship with food. So what are your insights regarding that? That's all for thank you.
I guess I can go first. Thanks for that. Oh gosh, the eating problems, as I understand them, don't distinguish what you eat, right? So you could be engaging in binge eating, like a bunch of healthy foods, like eating a salad for 5 minutes, but a lot of salad is still concerning. It still would be binge eating, right? So it doesn't distinguish between whether the food is unhealthy or not, because your intention is the intention of eating healthy or not is less a concern. The concern is around the relationship with the food, if you will, like if you to the point where your self-evaluation, your self-worth, I think, as pointed out previously, is unhealthy. Now, and meanwhile, remember, I know I just talked about anorexia and bulimia here, but a lot of eating-related problems don't always fit the categories. That's the problem. That's one of the challenges we have about mental health problems in general. Many depressive-related concerns, for instance, don't meet the criteria of a major depressive disorder, which is the primary diagnosis. So a lot of diagnoses are what's called NOS, which is not otherwise specified. So it could be eating disorder NOS, so meaning you don't fit the criteria, but it still could be concerning. I'm not saying that what you are describing is concerning. There would have to be a lot of other factors. For instance, are you avoiding socializing with friends because you fear that you will end up eating burgers with them because that's something that they do, for instance, right? So if it's affecting your social world, your interactions with other people, then that's something to look out for. I think, yes, every now and then it's okay to be concerned with what we eat, as well we should, right? We should be mindful, but for many of these eating disorders, it's the food itself is less concerning. It's what it's doing to you psychologically, emotionally, and socially that's more concerning. Like your relationship with family is such that the food, you're avoiding the food, for instance, that it's affecting your relationship with your family, or you see your self-worth in connection to the junk food or not, right? So I should avoid this in all costs because I am only of value as long as I am healthy as I perceive it, right? That's the psychological part that I was mentioning earlier. That's why the eating behavior itself is not enough to explain the problem if one has a problem. There has to be a psychological, emotional piece to it also.
Yeah.
I think so. Bear in mind, again, I'm not a medical professional. So what I do have is experience with therapy and my own lived experience. So when I was in therapy for my generalized anxiety disorder, I did learn about what do they call them? Like thinking traps, unhealthy thinking patterns. And it sounds like maybe there's something in the way that there's something in the anxious relationship that you have with this specific kind of food. And bear in mind that if you're eating a certain kind of food in moderation, that's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with eating some fries, a burger. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think in eating disorders, as far as I've encountered them, and as far as I've talked to other people who live with them, we do have some kind of fear food. For me, it was fast food like pizza, spaghetti, stuff that I knew was easy to throw up, but also was carb heavy. So it sounds like a fear food in that sense. But bear in mind that it also sounds like you're describing a form of rigid thinking that you have associated with a specific kind of food. So I would ask you to maybe ask yourself as well. Are you engaging in some kind of, are you engaging in a form of rigid thinking pattern that tells you this kind of food is only this, instead of being more flexible about it? But maybe it's enjoyable, it's good to eat in moderation, and that there's something to fear about it. I think that's as much as I can tell you as, a person with lived experience. Bearing in mind again that moderation is always the key. So
Right, so I'm actually gonna just drop into your first question as well, because this is actually something I tackle as well with my clients, because as an R&D, one thing to emphasize is that there's really no bad and good food, right? Because still any food will have something to offer your body, and it's the mindset of labeling something as bad and good that controls us in that sense. Where if you eat the bad food, you feel like you're a bad person, this moral value radiates to everything else you do in life, right? Because you're like, oh, I failed today. I ate a burger. Maybe I don't deserve to do anything good for myself today because I already did something bad, right? So this radiates to other aspects of life. And well, while the World Health Organization describes health as being your physical, mental, and social health, the food is like was mentioned, right? The food is not your biggest concern, it's your intention behind it, as well as how it impacts you mentally and socially and all of those aspects. That's another part of nutrition that we also go about, right? If you're doing this diet, if you're doing if you're doing this, can you really keep that up for the rest of your life? How does this impact you in general, right? How does this impact you being able to go out with people? How does this impact you with your family? How does this impact if it's on your birthday, somebody surprises you with a donut, and then instead of saying, oh my god, yes, the automatic thing you're thinking is, damn, ruining my diet, huh? Diba? Like, there's so many aspects to it in relation to that. There's actually there's orthorexia as well, where it's like super duper intense fears of eating unhealthy food, which can become unhealthy, right? Your obsession of health can actually be unhealthy in the long run. Going into intermittent fasting and all of those other diets, intermittent fasting itself isn't necessarily a diet, it's more of a dietary pattern. However, it depends on how you use it. So there have been benefits, but overall in impact to weight loss, it's about the overall amount you eat rather than the specific timing of how much you eat. It usually works because by default you end up eating less, so you're gonna lose weight. But again, the question is, it's a fad because it promises you results that you might not see, and it also creates those patterns in yourself that is unsustainable. So if you're gonna try anything, always ask yourself, can I keep doing this for the rest of my life in terms of diet, right? Can I keep eating this way for the rest of my life? If no, how can we adjust that? Coming from a dietitian, I'm here to tell you that you can eat your pizza, you can eat your burgers. What matters is what you eat most of the time rather than what you eat sometimes, right? And if it's for celebration, go for it. I mean, I have a chocolate every day or a piece of cake every day, and well, I wouldn't I hope, I wouldn't think I'm unhealthy, right? Because it's really about balance when it comes to food. Thank you.
Thank you po. Thank you.
So, is there any questions, guys? Comment your, put your surname at the chat box, and we will read your surname. Then you can proceed on asking. Ayan, si Mr. Labios, kindly open your mic and ask the panel your question.
Hello, am I audible?
Mr. Labios?
It's good.
Ayan, we can hear you now.
Our last question for this panel discussion po.
So, yung question ko po is kahit sino po sa ng speakers po natin. So, tanong ko lang po kung meron po ba kayong pwedeng suggestion or advice sa mga individuals na currently battling eating disorder, especially this pandemic. Kasi alam naman po natin na may mga protocols po tayong sinusunod. Doon parang mas na-less po yung options natin or yung resources to get help from other people. Thank you po.
I can go first. Mr. Labs, okay. So I understand. First of all, I hope that if this is for you, I hope that you're all right now. Okay, we should mahanap dun sa list of people. But anyway, so there are some resources that you can use. There are some talk therapies that are free. I can send you a link later of directories that have been verified that may be able to help you. But also, if you are alone and there's nobody in your physical sphere that you can talk to, please do reach out to support groups and to somebody that you trust in order for you to get some kind of support. So what's important is that you don't feel isolated at the beginning, and that you have because eating disorders sometimes, it's easy to get triggered. It's easy to feel like you're doing this by yourself, and as much as possible, you want to make sure that you're aware that there's somebody out there listening to you. So please reach out to someone. It doesn't have to be an advocate. It can be somebody that you trust. If that's not possible, there are some organizations as well who can help you out. One of them is Mental Health PH. Sila po. PH is also online, and all of these resources are online for you. So you don't have to go outside and endanger yourself. And it's also anonymous if that is a problem. So yeah, I know it's hard to tell you anything else, but just know that you're not alone. And that there are people out there. It's good that you're asking questions, and it's a great first step to know that you are dealing with something that has a name. It's almost always harder not to have to feel that you're doing something that is one of a kind and nobody else has ever had it. So you're not alone, and as much as possible, please reach out. And the organizers can reach me if they need those resources to have them for you.
Yeah, I think those are wonderful suggestions. I totally agree with those. I think if I can just add, I mean, especially those online resources, I'm aware of those as well. So I agree that I think those are good places to start. I think for anyone here, I don't know where you might be in terms of your sort of concerns. If you had concerns about your eating behaviors, I think it's a good start to go to reliable websites if you want to learn more about it. It's wonderful that you're having these kinds of webinars and sessions, and that's good. But it's also okay to look at reliable information from reliable websites if you're curious about what it is that you might be going through. So those fact-finding missions, I think is perfectly good, provided of course that you go to sites that are reliable. Because for me, you can use those as preparation, if you will. If you do decide to go to seek treatment once the quarantine is a bit more open, so I think it's okay to do that. And I think another thing I would add is if you want to talk about, you don't have to talk about the eating, if you will. You can talk about feelings. It's okay to do that, because sometimes, as noted earlier, the eating there can be a sense of shame or isolation that maybe you're not ready to talk about the actual eating itself. But it's okay to talk about other things, including the feelings around it, right? Without necessarily talking about the binge eating or the purging or whatever. I think it's okay to do that, and definitely for sure, it's okay to talk to a trusted adult. It doesn't have to be a professional. Some of us have older siblings, a trusted aunt or uncle you could go to if talking to your parents is uncomfortable. I think talking to a trusted adult. So I underscore the point earlier. You're not alone, and it's okay to talk to other people about it. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all of our questions for now. Thank you so much for our speakers and to everyone who asked, and of course to Dr. Del Castillo, Ms. Kyra, and Ms. Jo for entertaining the questions from our audience. We truly have learned a lot from the guest speakers' discussions and for everything that they openly shared today. So to express our gratitude, may we call on Lara Alfaro for the awarding of certificates.
Hello. Okay, so for our certificate, we would like to award the Certificate of Appreciation to Mr. Ronald Del Castillo, Doctor of Psychology, Master of Public Health, and Fellow of the Royal Society for Public Health, for imparting his valuable expertise and sharing his time as a resource person for the Mental Health Forum entitled Bite by Bite, a webinar about distinguishing the prominent eating disorders among Filipinos, given this 14th of May, the year of our Lord 2021. Signed by the group representative Aliana Alfaro and Associate Professor Milagros C. Aravillaga, PhD, RGC, and Registered Psychology, the course professor. So for the second Certificate of Appreciation. The certificate is awarded to Ms. Kyra Ballesteros for imparting her valuable expertise and sharing her time as a research person for the Mental Health Forum entitled Bite by Bite, a webinar about distinguishing the prominent eating disorders among Filipinos, given this 14th of May, the year of our Lord 2021. Signed by the group representative Aliana Alfaro and the course professor, Associate Professor Milagros C. Aravillaga, PhD, RGC, and Registered Psychology. And for the last certificate of appreciation, the certificate is awarded to Jo Margaret F. Sebastian, Registered Nutritionist and Dietitian, for imparting her valuable expertise and sharing her time as a resource person for Mental Health Forum titled Bite by Bite, a webinar about distinguishing the prominent eating disorders among Filipinos, given this 14th of May, the year of our Lord 2021, signed by the group representative Aliana Alfaro and the course professor, Associate Professor Milagros C. Aravillaga, PhD, RGC, and Registered Psychology.
Okay, so thank you, Lara, and again, thank you very much, Dr. Del Castillo, Miss Kyra, and Miss Jo, for taking the time to be with us here today and for sharing your knowledge and experiences to widen our perspectives regarding eating disorders. So I hope everyone has learned something from this forum, but before we part ways, we will have one last activity, if you don't mind, guys. We highly encourage everyone to take this time to digest what we have discussed today. So let's take a minute to have a moment of silence. To pause and reflect upon the things that we have learned and how we can apply them to ourselves. So to end this activity, say with us the words of affirmations that you see on your screen. Feel it in your soul. So first, how much I weigh does not define who I am. I deserve to treat my body with respect. I choose to be happy, healthy, and in harmony with my body, mind, and spirit. The process of recovery may be challenging, but it's worth it, and I know it. Okay, so thank you everyone for participating, and I hope that these words will cling to each and every one of us and empower us more to take care and love ourselves. So we would like to invite everyone to be with us in continuously raising awareness regarding eating disorders and being the first ones to actually understand and empathize with those who are currently going through it or have gone through it. Always remember, guys, if you know someone, anybody, or you yourself actually are experiencing symptoms of the disorders that we've discussed, we want you to know that it is okay to ask for help. Do not let the pressure of society, pressure of your family members, pressure from anybody, or the stigma surrounding this stop you from getting the help that you deserve, that you need. So yeah, we would like you to know that we are here with you. And to end this forum, may I invite everyone for our closing prayer.
As we close this meeting, Lord, we want to give honor to you. Thank you, God, for the time we had today to discuss issues and make decisions. May you bless each person who took the time to gather here today, and let your hand of protection be on them throughout the rest of the week. Let the work done here tonight come to fruition, and let it all be for your glory. Help us each to do our parts to bring the plans discussed to life. Amen.
And that's it, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Again, I am Kai Kabiab.
Yes, thank you again to Ma'am Miles Arabiaga for giving us the chance and the platform to have this webinar today. I am Sofia Ponce, and this has been Bite by Bite, a webinar about distinguishing the prominent eating disorders among Filipinos. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you po.
Okay, before we leave the Zoom, may we take a picture? Okay lang po ba magpa-picture sa inyo?
Saglit lang, guys. Please, group picture.
Okay, so please turn on your cameras, guys. Papa-picture po ako. Biggest fan here. Okay, who will take that? Ako na lang. Okay, ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, one more.
Bilang side.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, but thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you and congratulations. Thank you to our guests. I'll give my feedback either tonight or tomorrow. So, to whom do I send my feedback?
Hello, ma'am. Sa akin na lang po, isisend ko din po sa inyo yung link na tong recording ko.
Okay. Sige. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you po. Thank you, Best Tree. Wait, let's stay yung group natin.
Okay, stay yung group natin.
Picture, MM.